Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Yes, it has been a while. A belated Merry Christmas to all of you, and hope you all had a good time with your friends and family and anybody else in your lives. I have in front of me the recently released or re released The Death of Superman hardcover edition. This is actually the 30th anniversary deluxe edition of the famous story from 1992. And I got my hands on this last Wednesday, and from the looks of it, it has something that previous trade paperbacks did not have, but I'll get into that in a second. But I just wanted to kind of go through this really quick and just share with you the goodness that is inside this book. I won't actually go through page by page, but just give you a quick overview of what's inside. So as you can see, it's still shrink wrapped. So I'm going to take that plastic off and then dive right into it. But first off, let's take a quick look at the back, and you'll see another image of, an image of Superman and Doomsday there from Adventures of Superman, actually. That's the Tom Grummett, Doug Hazelwood, with a little Jerry Ordway sprinkled in. And, of course, you have your synopsis. And just for the sake of it, this is what this book contains. It contains, or this 30th anniversary special actually, collects Action Comics numbers 683 to 684, Adventures of Superman 496 to 497, Superman number 73 to 75, of course, Man of Steel 17 through 19, which I'm going to assume is only the portion that Doomsday appeared in at the end of that issue, and Justice League number 69. News Time, The Life and Death of Superman. That's actually something that has not been reprinted in the trade or in this hardcover fashion before. It has been reprinted in the two omnibuses that came out a while back. And of course, probably the biggest draw from this is the 2003 miniseries, Superman Day of Doom, which was like, I think, the 10th anniversary or an anniversary of the death of Superman as viewed through the citizens of Metropolis. And I remember when that came out, and it was kind of like an afterthought. And that story was reprinted in its own trade paperback several years ago, but has not been reprinted since. It's only like maybe 3 or 4 issues, so the book wasn't very big. So I guess it makes kind of sense to them to include it here. So, all right, so let me, like I said, get the plastic off and dive right into it. All right, folks, and now I've got the plastic shrink wrap off of the book, and I'm going to dive into this really quick. And just to give you a little overview of what's inside, and from the looks of it, it looks amazing, awesome so far. Looking at the dust jacket, you can kind of see how it pops out. The image pops off of the cover, so it's like has a different feel to it, which is always kind of cool to see. Of course, you have that gorgeous art by Dan Jurgens and Brett Breeding, and of course recolored and all of that good stuff. And as you can see, it says 30th anniversary deluxe edition with all of the famous super team writers and artists down there at the bottom. Opening it up, you see a nice image from Superman 75, the last splash page, although it's seen kind of like this interior here. And removing the dust jacket reveals the bleeding S that has become famous for this book, or for that story, with Doomsday's grr or R right there on the dust jacket flaps. So let's see. Opening it up, you have another couple of pages there, and we have a nice image there of Superman, but the color is sort of inverted, almost. And here's a little bit of a forward, what looks to be like a forward, and so there's a lot of that here to read. And this was a new interview by Dan Jurgens back in August of 2022, so that's this year. And now the actual story itself. And from the looks of it, these are the pages from Man of Steel number 17. Or, yeah, because in that particular issue, Doomsday technically did not appear until the last page, or at least his fist actually did. So this page alone is from Man of Steel number 17. The rest of this is sort of like the prologue from for Man of Steel 18. In any event, of course, it goes right into the story. The art looks great. It always has. Paper quality looks good. All of the details there. Although I noticed that instead of the barcodes or the direct editions, they've actually put the bleeding S there instead of leaving the barcodes there, which makes sense. It's also there as well. So that's going to be on all the various covers that's represented here. And this story has been collected dozens of times over the years, in particular trade paperbacks, various forms. I had the original trade in 1992, and then they reprinted it again. There's like a couple of versions of that. And then more recently, I suppose, it was collected into the Death and Return of Superman Omnibus. I think that was back around 2016 or 17, maybe 18, if I'm not mistaken. And that was probably the most comprehensive edition or volume of this story, or featuring this story at that point. And of course, later on, around 2019, we got the more updated The Death and Return of Superman Omnibus, which pretty much contained everything in the kitchen sink. Whereas I believe the original omnibus did not contain all of the missing bloodlines or, bloodlines issues from the Reign of the Superman arc. It did also contain the News Time special, various other behind the scenes stuff, in addition to poster art and that kind of stuff. But looking back to this book, this particular version, the art looks crisp, everything looks good, colors pop out. And of course, we all want to see, well, I want to see how 75 looks. And there it is. Here, instead of the bleeding S, they actually left Dan Jurgens and Brett Reading. And the cover that they chose was actually the first edition of the cover, instead of the later reprints from afterwards. Looks great. Art looks great. And of course, the kill shot for both of them. And a cool thing is this actually opens up. And that is the day for this is the day that a Superman died. So it's cool. This actually opens up for those of you who love that kind of stuff. And on the back of that is this Here Lies Earth's Greatest Hero, which is, I think, part of the Polybag edition, if I'm not mistaken. Turning the page. It moves right into, without any sort of fanfare or introduction, into the Superman Day of Doom #1. Now this contains the story that I mentioned earlier, the Day of Doom. And yeah, it's faithfully reprinted here. Cover, of course, you don't have any of the logos though, unlike before. And you still have that gorgeous art by Dan Jurgens. Flipping through the story. I think it was like 3 or 4 issues, if I'm not mistaken. And I think each chapter was sort of like mirroring how the original story was, so that was kind of cool at the time. And then this story concludes, and the News Time special begins. Now, real quick, I'm going to show you what the original News Time special and the Day of Doom trade looks like, so you can kind of get an idea for context. Okay, folks, and here we have it, the original trade for Superman Day of Doom and the News Time special from back in 1993. And you can see how the News Time special is actually oversized, almost like magazine format. And that is, at least the contents have been faithfully reproduced here. Albeit in standard comic book form. So that's something that you should take note of. And also, one thing that I do notice on the reproduction of the cover is that the sort of address code for Clark Kent's address is not here. And on the bottom, it had Clark Kent, 344 Clinton Avenue, Metropolis, etc., etc., etc. So that's not here, but that's okay. This is the original Day of Doom trade, just features the core story and not much else. And flipping through the News Time special, everything is there, looks great. All of the ads, or all of the in-universe ads, I should say, because this was a fictional magazine. Car ads, tributes from various heroes and celebrities of the time. And I believe that's how it ended. And then we have all of the extra stuff in the back here, which I think is kind of cool. And this stuff was from the Hunter Prey follow-up to the Death and Return of Superman that happened maybe a couple of years later. And this gorgeous artwork that was actually featured on t-shirts. And I have one with Superman being on the front and Doomsday being on the back. And more promotional art for Hunter Prey. Now, I do want to point out, it's kind of interesting that they would include that in this book, especially considering that Hunter Prey is not part of this. I mean, that kind of seems a little off that it would be in here, although on the other hand, I kind of understand why they did it. But as far as the narrative is concerned, you have this whole original story of the death and return of, or at least the death of Superman. It does not touch on his aftermath or the reign of the Supermen or any of that. But yet they have artwork here from the Hunter Prey, which, like I said, it's always great to see it, but it kind of seems out of place in comparison with the rest of the book. And we have concept sketching art with Dan Jurgens, sort of annotations on Doomsday, and the storyboard that has become so famous. And one thing that I did not see in the omnibus, I'll have to pull it out and take a look, is you have the photographs of the original super team here. So that's kind of cool. And the cast, well, at least the super team on the Lois and Clark set, I remember that episode. And the famous bookends, which I never did get. And these two bookends actually show the storyline as in its entirety split up into several volumes. So we have 5 volumes here that contains basically the whole core story, including the Superman, Doomsday, Hunter Prey, and all of that. And you can probably find these individually out there if you really wanted them. So that's kind of a cool thing as well. And then it also shows you the trading card set, which was awesome. I remember that, and various other merchandise and things that were basically used to promote the story. Some more cool things here. Some John Bogdanove sketches, or at least original art pages, which look nice. More tribute stuff in the back. Some wonderful stuff here. Now this stuff I can understand as being in the book. And then we have more interviews 30 years later. So this is definitely going to be something worth your time to read, especially if you've already read all of this before. But this is part of the new content. So very lengthy interviews here. So that's something worth looking at. And then it kind of concludes with the previously seen Here Lies Earth's Greatest Hero and the draped flag, or draped Superman's cape as a flag. And the last dust flap contains the famous image of Superman bleeding from the side of his face after Doomsday swiped him with his knuckles. And that pretty much wraps it up. It's definitely worth your while, I would say, folks. It's definitely worth the time. I struggled with it as far as convincing myself to buy it, but this is the story, this is the Superman story that got me into comic books. And back in 1992, I had the single issues. I have most of them still. I still have my original trades. I have the 2 omnibuses. I have the individual volumes that I showed you earlier with the bookends inside. So for the most part, all of this material has been made available before, but the behind the scenes photos, the behind the scenes photos that they showed, the sketch art or reproductions of original sketch art back there, and the forward by Dan Jurgens from August of this year are some of the many new content included in this edition, which is great. And it will look good on any Superman fan shelf. And in my case, it will be right next to all of the other Death of Superman stuff. So yeah, folks, I would definitely recommend this one. Highly, 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 highly recommend. It'll set you back about, let me see, about $40. If you find it on Amazon, I'm sure it may be slightly cheaper, or any other outlet, or maybe In Stock Trades has it, because they have a lot of good stuff there as well. So yeah, guys, definitely check this one out. And if you have any questions about it, of course, drop me a line. I'll be happy to answer you. This is my favorite Superman story of all time. And anything having to do with the death and return of Superman and the whole Doomsday thing is always going to be something that I'm going to jump on. But I will say, though, that I think this will probably cap my dipping, double dipping, triple dipping, quadruple dipping of this storyline, because like I said, I have the original trades, I have the reprinted editions from a few years ago, the 2 omnibuses, as well as the singles and things like that. So unless there's something significantly new that comes out in another edition down the line, I don't think I'm going to be getting any further ones. But yeah, highly recommend it, guys. 2 thumbs up. And yeah, until next time, guys, live long and prosper. Be well. And if I don't, talk to any of you guys before the new year, a very happy new year. Please be safe. Please be warm. Half the country is frozen right now. And take care of yourselves and each other. All right. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.